It was told by our chief guest that in the Constitution, in every chapter, there was a sketch, and that sketch was removed. There is history behind that. Nandalal was a great artist. In Haripura Congress, he was assigned by Mahatma Gandhi to make sketches, and it was his sketches which were displayed at Haripur Congress. And that original constitution was written by, handwritten constitution by people from Rampur, Uttar Pradesh. And out of 23 portraits and sketches, Lord Ram, Sita, Ashok, Nalanda University, and all of them have been removed. And I suspect one reason behind that. Besides Jawaharlal Nehru's hate for our Indian culture, his greater hatred for Subhash Chandra Bose. One sketch, last sketch was of Subhash Chandra Bose. And that was unlikely to be accepted by Nehru. And nobody knows till now who ordered that original constitution should not be printed. And it was a surprise for people from Rampur who wrote the constitution, and that was a well written, means the handwriting was so good that it was better than the printed copy. But dear friends, this is a symbolic aspect. Here we have a different kind of gathering. We are, most of us are activists, also academics, working in different fields, and we have to discuss decolonization. As our role, what decolonization means, what challenges it throws upon us, these are the three questions. What is our role? That not necessarily that similar role is of Indian intellectuals. What is the role of intellectuals? That doesn't mean the role of the university campus academics. And their role doesn't match with the role of the masses. One thing should be clear. Indian masses could not be colonized. So there is not a challenge to decolonize the Indian masses. So challenge is not to fight with the Europeans, but to whom to fight, whom to contest. We don't have also to afraid with the Marxists because they are marginalized people, discredited people. But the bigger challenge is useful idiots. Who are they? They are the liberals. They are the subalterns. Why I call them useful idiots? I begin with a work, and in inverted comma, great scholar, Dipesh Chakravarti. Dipesh Chakravarti is a Marxist, a subaltern historian. He wrote a book, Provincializing Europe. The ideology, the program, and the action, all three combined together, articulated as Europe is not a universe. Suppose the entire world is a country, then Europe is a province. Now that province considers itself the permanence of its domination. This illusion of the Europe, that its domination is a permanent, that is idea generated by European scholars, is necessarily adopted by non-European scholars, internalized by them, and that internalization is a natural internalization. Here, a subaltern historian, Dipesh Chakravarti, challenges Europe in his work and calling the Europe that you are a province, not the universe. And we and you are at equal terms. This is useful document. But where he becomes idiotic, you cannot contest any of your opponent without creating alternative paradigm. That alternative paradigm should not be rhetorical, polemical. It should be theoretically sound. If I say Europe is a province, then I would say India has universal philosophy to give. I cannot depend on Veda, Puran, Ramayana, Mahabharata. They are great ancient works. But the world requires what we have to give today to the world community. That is the important question. Here Dipesh Chakravarti and his ilk depart from the originality of India. They don't want to contextualize the Indian cultural intellectual legacy in the present context, because contextualizing ancient culture means rewriting history, and rewriting history means disowning the history which Marxists have developed in last 60 years. That's why our challenges is greater. They are adopting the ideological moorings which we owe, but they are not developing in substantive terms. Friends, second challenge is that Indian academicians delve into most of the things which are outdated in academic circles even of the Western countries. Just like we are discussing modernity, post-modernity, left, neo-left, we are discussing structuralist, post-structuralist. These are all micro-academic works in the Western social science. They have moved ahead. So we don't have to be victim or prisoner of their ideological outdated terminology and narratives. Unfortunately, Indian universities are far behind that. Third important challenge is we misinterpret decolonization in terms of language. That becomes the gray area. Most of the people polemically summarize decolonization mean abandoning English. Here debate ends with bitterness. As far language is concerned, I begin with this factor. For rest of the world, decolonization, it is Africa, decolonization means language. For India, decolonization means culture. In Africa, N. Gogoi was a great scholar. The first step he took, that he started writing in his own language, his own mother tongue. He was a great novelist in English. He was well known, established. The memories of his childhood, he narrated. He narrated how the colonial forces did mental engineering by imposing English. They have not merely imposed English, they imposed certain kind of culture which was alien to the African culture. There is one word in Africa, Ubuntu. Ubuntu means, that is a crux of their values and philosophy. Ubuntu means, I am because you are. My existence depends on your existence. Means they don't believe in binary, that me, you and me. They believe in coexistence. But in school, he says, anyone who used to speak mother tongue was punished. And how to find out who is speaking mother tongue? During the break. Then it was the person who used to, the boy who used to identify, the person who was speaking in mother tongue was awarded with good marks, promotion. The boy who was found speaking English had a plate on his chest, I am a donkey. So this kind of incidents had impact on his mind, and he concluded that it was the language which was the reason for colonizing the mind of Africans. Here language has been one of the factors, but not the main and sole factor for colonizing the Indian mind. This was deliberated in 1931. I would mention two great speeches in 1931. One by K.C. Bhattacharya, a great philosopher. He delivered Ashutosh Memorial Lecture in Kolkata, in Bengal. And other lecture was Mahatma Gandhi's in London. Mahatma Gandhi deliberated how the education system of India was destroyed, and he described as destruction of a beautiful tree. But most important is a lecture delivered by K.C. Bhattacharya. And I consider it as a manifesto of ideological movement for decolonization in India. It was the manifesto, it is the manifesto, it would be manifesto till we get decolonized. In that lecture, he made a fundamental difference between political subjugation and cultural subjugation. He said political subjugation is visible. It is by a dominant force to the common people, to armsless people, through the power of military, economic force. It is visible. And it is easier to fight against political subjugation. But it is difficult to fight cultural subjugation, because when cultural subjugation takes place, those who are subjugated, they feel that they are gaining, they are not losing. And when the cultural subjugation ends, then there is a rebirth of a nation. Maharishi Aurobindo used the term rebirth of the nation, and he also used this term, rebirth of the nation takes place when a man frees himself from such kind of mental subjugation. Unfortunately, after independence, in India, every cultural and social issue remain rhetorical, polemical, and we fail to develop a theoretical position on that. What is the importance of theoretical position? In India, the Marxist parties have no following all over the country. They are the fag end of their existence. Even the Communist Party of India is not a national party now. But Marxism is a theoretical position. So there is an impact of that. So we must develop a theoretical position of decolonization, agenda for decolonization, programs for decolonization, and identify the role of activists, intellectuals, academic campuses, and politicians. So I am deliberating certain elements. You know, just after independence, we blamed Britishers. Until now, Macaulay is present in each and every lecture. When he was alive, he could not have imagined that his impact would be so much that a nationalist, a Marxist, a centrist, a liberal, a mass, people from masses, or highly placed intellectuals, everybody would take his name just like the means essentialize his name in any lecture. What is the reason? This shows our weakness. It is not the fault of the Macaulay. We developed a Macaulay in ourselves, so we could not free ourselves from the Macaulay. Before Macaulay, there was Charles Grant in 1792. It was his basic structural scheme which was adopted by James Mill, historian, and then Macaulay. Charles Grant convinced the Britishers we have to create empty imitators. If they would imitate 100%, they would equate ourselves. So don't give them education in such a way that Indians should become Britishers. They should remain half-empty imitators. And that was the basic structure, basic scheme of Charles Grant, which was adopted by all successive ideologues of colonialism in India. After the independence, we could not think in terms of how to define our history. Now it is too late, but it's also too early. I'm giving one example, how the decolonization program of agenda for decolonization begins. Because I said it is not the masses who are colonized, it is academics, idea and intellectuals who are decolonized. Those things which should have been the main text, they have been turned into footnotes, and footnotes have been turned into main text in our social sciences. I am giving one example. If someone wants to read in this audience and would ask me, I want to know the role of Indian soldiers in the World War I. Is there any monograph? There is a footnote in the history. 1/3 of the soldiers, total soldiers of the British employed were Indians. More than 77,000 killed. 1,58,000 soldiers were sent on one front. We don't have any a monograph on our role in the World War I and how we were compelled to die. You know, when Indian soldiers came back from the prison, they demanded their backlog salaries. What they got? They were killed. In 1919, there was a peace treaty, Paris Peace Treaty. In 1919, there was General Dyer in India and Jallianwala Bagh. If someone wants to know the debate in British Parliament on Jallianwala Bagh massacre, role of General Dyer and perspective of two political parties of Britain, mainstream newspapers, editorials and opinion pieces on General Dyer, we have footnotes, but we don't know. There may be some research work, but that hardly matters. These are the two incidents which show that we have ourselves departed from the self-assignment of history. We can't depend on the state. The first Prime Minister of India said, I came to know India through the prism of Europe. This is not unknown to the people. This is also not unknown to the people that Marxists have collaboration with Nehruvian state. Their philosophy we know. They believe in sub-nationalities. When Constituent Assembly was to be formed, Communist Party of India passed a resolution there should be 17 Constituent Assembly in this country because we have 17 sub-nationalities. So we know our political adversaries, their philosophy, their perspective to history. It is our task. We can't expect from them. Where is the fault line? Colonial situation, a phrase was developed by French sociologists. That is a new narrative as a part of decolonization. Colonial situation means the colonial forces change their form from one form to another form just to maintain their domination. So the brutalities done by them during the colonial rule, when you will raise the question of General Dyer, they will say it is individual. You will raise the question about the brutalities done in Africa, they will say it was individual officer. The colonial situation theory says that it is not the individual's act, it is the combined feature of the colonial rule. It was inherent in the colonial relationship colonial system, and they adopted the means of brutalities to maintain their domination. It is at this juncture the decolonization debate has taken place all over the world. Those who are main participants in the debate are certainly not only in India. There are certain useful idiots also outside India. These useful idiots are there. That is Franz Fanon. I consider him better than Indian Marxists. He was a Marxist. He wrote a book, The Wretched of the Earth. In that book, it is the African and non-Indians intellectuals who developed the decolonization which has become a challenging theories for European scholars. In The Wretched of the Earth, he quoted a poem which shows the brutalities of the European forces. He says, "The white man killed my father because my father was strong. The white man raped my mother because my mother was beautiful. The white man wore out my brother and the hot sun on the roads because my brother was strong. Then the white man came to me with bloods in his hands, and in his tyrant's voice he said, 'Hey boy, a basin, a towel of water.'" This shows the tyranny they have adopted all over the world. But what happened in India? In Africa and other parts of the world, like Franz Fanon and Ngugui wrote Decolonizing the Mind. They created a theory, a practical program to fight with the Western scholars. It is at this juncture the Western scholars changed their narratives. Here Foucault and Derrida comes. These two scholars established that. They knew that the challenges are coming from the people who were subject nation. Now he said there is not a meta-narrative. There cannot be one narrative for entire the world. There are micro-narratives. African case would be different. Latin American case would be different. So again they have subjugated us. When you will proceed on the decolonization, theory of decolonization, you will find two important terminologies. One is Orientalism, other is post-colonial discourse. We must know these both the things. Both are important, even if we are activists or intellectuals. Orientalism means there is a relationship between dominant and there is others. The Western civilization produces otherness. So they take as colonies as objects. There is an inherent assumption is that West is superior and rest are inferior. From that there was a white man burden, civilizing mission. These are the product of that assumption. So Orientalism dominated the world for a long time. It was again a Western scholar, Edward Said, who wrote the book Orientalism. In that he questioned the otherness. It is the questioning the otherness had changed the discourse. Then there is a vague and concept emerged, the post-colonial discourse. This is just like a rainbow. Anyone who jumps, that becomes the post-colonial part of post-colonial discourse. Here I would summarize the entire Western discourse that they are throwing the idea, changing the idea, and the idea becomes a dominant idea. We imitate that idea, and Homi Bhabha is a great scholar. He said, mimic man. So Indian scholars are a mimic man. We just imitate what they say. We just interpret what they say. One day they said that there was a modern world. We accepted that. One morning I got up and I was told that no, we are in the postmodern world. My life was the same, but I became the past of the postmodern world. Now they are abandoning the postmodernity, but I am the same what I was with pre-modern world. So for the West, this is a change. So we have to challenge the narratives. How to challenge these narratives? You just see the independence of India. Here decolonization debate assumes very significance. In 1947, India became independent. Independence through transfer of power. How many us know the theoretical basis of transfer of power? This concept was challenged none other than Franz Fanon. He said colonialism is a use of violence is a natural state. He condemned non-violence. He said non-violence is right till the colonialism doesn't use violence. The day colonialism starts using violence, then there is no relevance for non-violence. It is a relationship between the violent force and the armless forces. And here Frantz Fanon says, challenging the colonialism by yielding greater violence. It is the only way which overhauls the entire structure, political, social and cultural, from bottom to top. Unless you use the violence against the colonial forces, things remain the same, because masses are indoctrinated that the forces which ruled, they were politically bad, but culturally good. That was the case of India. I am not condemning the Satyagraha and the Mahatma Gandhi's movement. I am just debating the issues. The transfer of power means there are three ingredients of the transfer of power. First is the new sovereignty would come through the act of British Parliament. It is the act, every small element is a part of the British Act of Parliament, and the British Act of Parliament has given us independence. Secondly, British flag would be lowered and Indian flags would take place. That happened. The colonial flag is lowered down and new state flag comes to that place. Third is, the British army or colonial army would be given musical band reception. And when Britishers leaving India, most of the Indians were part of the British army, but howsoever number there was, they were given the musical reception and see off. Like that, 200 years they have served us for some noble cause. And last, there is fourth element I added in this theory. The last British officer would serve till the last date. And here Mountbatten was living the Rashtrapati Bhavan. He was serving the nation, serving or deserving, I don't know, but he was there. And he was very much in the presence of Mahatma Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, Sardar Patel. No one is exception in the Congress. They all are collectively guilty for imposing colonial mindset. I am not going to give any benefit of doubt to any Congress leader. If anyone says that he disagreed, there were chances to revolt, there were chances to show the dissent in the public and come out in the public, but they remain as opportunist congressmen. They were worse than Jawaharlal Nehru. Transfer of power. They legitimized the partition of India because with the nationalist mascot, they supported Jawaharlal Nehru. So this is the transfer of power. The transfer of power is related to another concept which Roosevelt propounded. You know, there is a complete harmony between the Britishers, Americans, all Europeans. They don't disagree on fundamental. Roosevelt said, we celebrate Roosevelt in our book. Roosevelt was great anti-colonialist. He said the days of colonialism is over. And Truman supported later on, his successor. Both of them had not departed from the original theory. He said we should adopt the method so that the post-colonial ties between the colonial world and the colonies and their masters should be more stronger. So his opposition to colonialism was to have a better ties, a strong ties with the colonial world, and that protectionism should continue. They are the protector of our economy, culture, civilization. These are the three things. So Roosevelt and Truman inspired their Churchill, Attlee and other British leadership. So now we come to decolonization's meaning. There are two parts of the decolonization. One is change in the structure of the international relationship. That was not under the control of the British forces. World War II changed the circumstances and the entire international situation has changed. The power has come to the hands of the people who were till yesterday subject nations. But this was one part of decolonization. Other part of decolonization has not been deliberated. So how to move? What should be agenda for decolonization? Agenda for decolonization, first agenda for decolonization is to discover your own history. You know, in the world there is a new narrative, great divergence debate in economics. And on the basis of that debate, scholars like Piketty and others who wrote Capital, They are discovering, inventing the history of 17th, 18th centuries, the economic exploitation. Dadabhai Naoroji in India wrote on British rule in India. In that, in 1901, he calculated that 500 million pound was transferred to Britain from India in last 34 years of the 19th century. In 34 years, 500 pounds was transferred to Britain. I am giving two data. Two scholars from the West have worked and they wrote a book. They are Herneti and Townley. They said in textiles, this book was published in 1983. Unfortunately, these works are also being done by the Westerners. In textile, India's market was 100%. Indians were in control of 100% textile market. But things have changed after the East India Company came, and their share remained only 23%. Rest 67%. Rest 67% imported and 11% mill products. Again, there were 28.4% Indians working in manufacturing, mines and construction. Their number came down 24.4% in 3 decades. So first agenda for decolonization for intellectuals and researchers is to start writing monographs, well-researched books, not merely on economic exploitation by Britishers, but all the issues and subjects which concern to our actual history, realities of India. That would change the narrative. One work may not affect, but thousands of the monographs emerging from different corners of India, impacting culture, economy, civilizational history, they are going to change the narrative. Neither Western scholar nor useful idiots can ignore our research. This is the first challenge before the Indian researchers. I am giving one example. One footnote in history is Subhash Chandra Bose was compelled to resign from the Congress presidentship in 1939. So what is the outcome of the Tripuri Congress? What is the democratic state of the country? What was the fourth state reaction on the Tripuri Congress? What was the manifesto of Subhash Chandra Bose, and did they react in sympathy or they were happy that Subhash Chandra Bose left the Congress presidency? So one document, it is neither the criticism of Mahatma Gandhi nor appreciation of Subhash Chandra Bose. It is merely an empirical fact which is a center of debate. How the decline of democracy, in India the party system was at the infant stage, and internal party democracy began to decline. So this narrative will impact the history. This narrative will impact the party system. Other example I am giving. What is the role of those who are not intellectuals? How to do that? Those who are not a part of the university. Friends, I was doing a work on demography. I started working on 2011 demography. Then I went back to post-independent demography. Then I started reading the Census Reports, and believe me, after reading all volumes of the Census Reports of the British India, I began with the 1872, 1881, 1891, 1901, 1911, 1921, 931, 1941. I came to the conclusion, why did British rule India? They are intellectually sound. They are not the past worshippers. Unlike us. Why I say we are past worshipper, instead of contextualizing the past, we start worshipping the past. Past is great. And we come to a very hazy and emphatic terminology, Vishwaguru Bharat. I don't know how India can become Vishwaguru. Since my childhood I am listening, and my father was also listening this. My grandfather was also listening this. India will one day become Vishwaguru. And just like जैसे कहते तोता रटता है, भारत विश्वगुरु बनेगा, भारत विश्वगुरु बनेगा, कैसे बनेगा we don't know. So there is a great idea behind that. There is a great narrative behind that. But instead of that narrative, idea and thought, we just use this term that I call it self-narcissism. Willful narcissism rather. We become very happy, no, we are Vishwaguru, we are going to be Vishwaguru, whatsoever it may be. So we have to come out from the willful narcissism. This is a self-destructive. I am giving 2 examples. It is a kind of what Franz Fanon calls it, psychological disorder of the people who have been ruled for 300 years, 400 years, 500 years. They create a sense of inferiority in the mind of the people. And that inferiority, either we internalize the foreigners or we overreact against the foreigners. We say, no, you are wrong, we are right, one day we will dominate. So colonizing the colonizer, this is basically colonizing the colonizer, but we don't have the skill to colonize them. Third thing, what others should do. In that census report, I found there how they created identity politics in this country. And unfortunately, these documents remained untouched. They are just like Antarctica. Few scientists visit it and they convey us that Antarctica is like that. So we must visit that Antarctica. Census report is the entire, their intellectual output is a census reports. I am giving an example. They started discussing how to destruct Hindu society. This is in census report. Both Marxists and Britishers have one common quality. They discuss what should be discussed in their boardroom, they discuss in the public. And that is inherent weakness of them. You go to Marxist documents, they would discuss this is false, this is false. So they inform their adversaries, these are our fault lines. So Britishers also discuss how to divide the Hindu society. They are discussing, they say we in the census report. The weakest point was those people who have been living on plateau in forest areas, the Hindus. So they coined the term animists, and the tribal term they have changed in 1931 census. Till 1931 they used for them animists. There is an entire discourse on animism, and now the discourse by same scholars, their successor ideologues, now they say tribals are not Hindus. They create identity politics now in different form. If we would just unravel their discussion about their character, their nature, their civilization, their culture, it would be a revolt by the educated tribal people against the Britishers, the Western scholars, the Marxist scholars. How they have been contemptuously described as animists. Second, they are discussing. In 1911-10, E.A. Gate was census commissioner. He issued a circular, very interesting circular, that was based on divide the Hindu society on the caste line. They don't want that Hindu society should be a monolithic combination. So this time after tribal, the target was so-called untouchables. So they have issued 10 questions. Do you use the commonwealth? Do you have common dining? Or your touch makes someone untouchable? These are the questions you have to fill up. The first revolt came from a Hindu intellectual, Colonel U.N. Mukherjee. He was son-in-law of Surendranath Banerjee, former Congress president. He wrote Hindus a Dying Race and other books. India, the most highly intellectual articulated 2 monographs by U.N. Mukherjee. There is no parallel. They demolished the Christian missionaries. They demolished the Christian ideologues. They demolished the colonialists. And it is this book which led Gate to withdraw his circular. Mukherjee was not a scholar. He was a professional doctor. He was in the army. So this is the role, those who are not the part of the university system or not the intellectuals, so-called intellectuals, they can bring out the monographs challenging the Western paradigm, challenging the Marxist paradigm, but they need to follow the methodology till the day they are dominant. Because you cannot kill the dominant by adopting alternative methodology. Once they are demolished, then you can develop your own methodology. By that time, you have to fight the enemy with their medicines, their methodology, their modus operandi. So this is non-intellectual activists, they can work in different areas. In that census report, there is a third element which is very important. They are giving examples. There has been conversion, religious conversion, but both Muslims and Christians had the Hindu social and cultural values. The one line they write, the census authors of the census report write, the reform in Jain community means educating people, educating masses. Reform in Muslim means liberating them from Hindu ethos. So their reform is not concerned to education, their reform is not concerned to developing character, their reform is to alienating from the Hindu culture ethos. Another line they write, in India, nobody bothers about their neighbor's religion, they bothers about their social status. So mode of worship is not the concern of dispute in India. They say they go to animist, they are confused. The way they say that there is no difference, there is no thin line, even thin line between the animist and the Hindus. So entire census reports in volumes, each year every state has 3 and 4 volumes, means there are hundreds of the volumes. They discuss on religion, at least 60 to 80 pages in every report discussion on religion. And maximum part is on Hinduism, discussing Hinduism, then Christianity, then Islam. So you must delve into their intellectual work, find out the contradictions that doesn't need your university qualifications. Third thing is that we have to create a meta-narrative about decolonization, which should be free from narrow differences in domestic politics. This is one narrative which is going to unite the people. And that meta-narrative has following factors. First is that instead of radical vocabulary against the Western culture and society, because after 60 years of independence, there are certain elements which Indian society has adopted, a large part of population has adopted. They are the people who are the opinion makers, they are the people who are at the university, who are at intellectual level. So 3 things we have to do. First thing is that finding out the civilizational difference between Western civilization and Indian civilization. Here Ashish Nandi has given a very intelligent term. He wrote a book, Intimate Enemy. He said that West is not a geographical factor now, it is a psychological factor. First, Western impact means the impact of a particular geography and their culture on India. Now Westernism has its birth in India itself. It generated a forces in colonial societies which alter the entire cultural paradigm of the country, cultural behavior pattern. And that behavior pattern creates inferiority complex among the masses. And the masses are compelled to follow the intellectuals. So here challenge is that to kill the intimate enemy. Here intimate enemy can be killed. And I am giving the example of Yajnavalkya's Samvad with Katyayani and Maitreyi, 2 wives of Yajnavalkya. One was for material goods, Katyayani, and Maitreyi asked, would I be immortal after getting all the wealth? Yajnavalkya says, no, you can't be immortal with the wealth. So here I would quote Mohan Bhagwat ji, if you want to be intellectual, first you have to be a sant. You have to renounce the material happiness. You want to renounce the state patronage. You have to renounce any kind of state patronage. If any kind of state patronage comes, original intellect dies. None of the Indian intellectuals, Kautilya was not under the state patronage. Rather, he was fighting against the state. Yajnavalkya was not under the state patronage. Lajpat Rai, any part of the country you go, for the first time people came to recognize Das Bodh and used it pan-Indian literature. The man who wrote or delivered lectures compiled as Das Bodh in Maharashtra and being quoted in Kerala. The newspaper of Kerala quoting Das Bodh. Lajpat Rai is being and Kesari is quoted in Kerala's newspaper. This is the time 1880 to 1920. The Indian culture, Indian art, Indian archaeology, Indian literature, both 4 things were deliberated. Original writings came. That became challenging to the Britishers. And here they adopted the methodology to patronizing the moderate politicians of the Congress and delegitimizing the cultural nationalists. Here begins the history of delegitimization and legitimation, and they adopted the method so that they were knowing that one day India would be a free nation, but it should remain as a culturally subjugated nation. Here we have to revive the spirit of 1880 to 1920, this period debate and discourse. And that discourse can only change the psychology of India. We don't have to fight with the Britishers here. We don't have to fight Nehruvians. We don't have to fight Marxists. We have to just create alternative intellectual discourse. That alternative intellectual discourse should be unhampered, not for the state patronage, not for the others, but Swanta Sukhai. The day we will start, because decolonization is a program, is a project. It should not turn into a writing stage. For last 30 years, we go through any lecture of decolonization, they are the good stage on decolonization. We will get nothing out of that. So we should free from writing essays on decolonization. We start working, creating an alternative narrative. That is I think, a optimism for the country, and I think that is the only way that rhetoric will become the substantive fact that India is a Vishwaguru. Thank you.